Today, I want to talk to you about the intersection of spiritual and sustainable travel and what I mean by those terms. So, sustainability is a big term that incorporates many different aspects. So it's not just green buildings or using efficient energy systems. It's also, treating your employees well and making sure they're paid well and have, adequate time off. It's things like choosing, even if you want to say go to a really popular destination like, Rome or Florence or Paris. It's choosing the off season or the slightly off season, when there aren't as many people there. So larger crowds might have more of an impact on a particular area and strain the local economy, and not in a good way. So it might be a strain on sanitation and electricity, and whereas they still need the people visiting at all times of the year to keep a steady, their economy moving. And yet, there are time periods where less people go, and that might be a better experience for the traveler. Not to have to push through the crowds and wait for hours online, to crush into a museum. I think I remember going to the Vatican, and there were just like so many of us. We were just all like crowded into the room, and you couldn't really see everything. You were kind of like being, pushed through like cattle almost, it seemed. You're just kind of like herded through next room, and to the point where you don't even really enjoy it, and you're just like, oh, that's the Sistine Chapel. Yeah, I'm not super impressed, because you've seen a million things. You get a little jaded about it, especially if you're tired and thirsty because you've been standing in line for hours. So those are at least just a few of the considerations. There are so many. There are, there's sustainable tourism councils that have their own, enumerated important, things of importance that they look for before giving, say, a property or whether it was a hotel or resort or whatever, their seal of approval. They have to jump through many hoops. So that's why it's sometimes better to look for places that have that kind of labeling, because there's usually at least something that they are required to do and not just say they're doing it. A lot of things are just changing now around the world as far as with, climate change initiatives and recycling. It's like ubiquitous now. So and a lot of the places are doing away with the single-use plastic bottles. Those little, remember you used to go to the hotels and you'd get the little shampoo and conditioner and the body lotion and the body wash, and if you really liked them, you would like put them in your bag every night so that they'd give you more the next day, and then you'd bring them home and use them because you really liked it. So that's not a sustainable solution, because as we've come to know, a lot of the plastic just ends up in the ocean in these big gyres, I believe they call it, where the waters swirl and they just collect in these huge areas. So yes, there are companies that are starting to, determine ways to pick up that plastic out of the water as it breaks down into tiny little microplastics that we're all like eating and drinking and not even knowing it. So it's like they're trying to do things, but if they only have one or two boats with the nets, it's still like a big problem that needs to be solved. But they're working on it. See, that's the thing that people need to realize too. We can't wait until all the problems are solved before we start making, better decisions about our travel. And some of those things might be, the decisions are, do I travel at all? There might be some people on that end of the spectrum, just, you know what, it hurts the earth too much, I'm just not going to go anywhere. It's like, I don't really think that that's the answer. Because so many people, they need to have their eyes opened to see what else is out there and how other people live. Because if you only stay around what you know, then you don't know that there's any different way. So one of the importance, the most important thing about travel is that you see, you meet new people and new cultures, and you see how other people do things. And you might realize that what you hear on the news might not be 100% accurate about a particular area. But you can only really know that by going yourself and doing it for yourself. So, which leads into the spiritual travel aspect. When I use that term, I'm not really meaning religious travel, although some people might want to do that. Some people do, pilgrimages or long retreats or, any number of things, visit, the lands of their, religion where it started. And that would be a meaningful spiritual experience for them. But in another sense, everything around us has a spiritual essence and energy, a vibration. So any place could be sacred and spiritual and special to an individual or to a group of people together. And that kind of spiritual experience probably can't be met in a large, tour. It's probably more personalized and specialized to your feelings, your beliefs, a place in the world that might have special meaning for you, but not really anyone else. Or it could, overlap with the, religious sacredness and the sacredness of family, so your ancestors, where they came from. So visiting those areas might provoke a special feeling within you that you wouldn't get otherwise. And that's more what I mean when I talk about spiritual travel. I went to Greece a couple of years ago, and I've done things like Reiki and other types of even divination. And when I knew I was going to be a 2-hour drive away from Delphi, which is the Oracle of Delphi and all that history, and I'm like, I don't know if or when I'll get back to Athens, and it's a couple of hours, 2.5 hours away from there. I just didn't know if I would ever get back, and it just seemed like a really special experience to have to go there. So I added a couple of days on to the end of a 10-day cruise of Greece and Cyprus, and I hired a private, it wasn't a tour guide, it was a private driver, but they were going to go to a couple of places. But because it was a private driver, when he asked me about the monastery. I said I just wasn't even, I didn't know that they were far apart. I'm like, well, maybe for a few minutes, but if it's like an hour in one direction, it's not going to be a few minutes. So I was able to just say, you know what, I don't want to do that part of what I paid for, because it's a private, it's a private driver. So I'd rather just go right to Delphi and spend as much time as I want there. And I did. They have it, broken down, when you look for a driver. Sometimes they have it set up like you're going to go here and here and here. So I just knocked the one right off. And I decided to go all the way through the whole complex, I guess you would call it, because there was also Athena's temple. There was this whole separate area up on a hill, and then there was down the road and another hill. So I was able to just explore to my heart's content. I was done after 2 hours. It was hot and I was thirsty, and I ran out of my water, and I was just ready to go at that point. And then I only needed like 35 minutes in the museum. Originally they had allotted, an hour to that. And when I went, along those pathways where those oracles had traveled, I was able to take my time, take pictures, stop, just, feel the energy of the place and enjoy myself as long as I wanted. While I was there, I saw a few tour guides, just stopping at a couple of the, obvious, things that are on their tour, and they never went all the way up to the top. There was a theater kind of area up there. So it depends on what you want. Like, some people want the guide telling them everything, and some people just want to go and experience the energy of the place for themselves without the being on the guide's schedule, so to speak, and only hearing what the guide wants to tell you. Whereas if you wanted to do a little bit of detouring or research into what was interesting to you, like I was able to do, and there were some signs around, so I was able to still get some of that, knowledge as well. And I bought a couple of books afterwards to bring home with me. They didn't have many in English, but there were a couple. So that's like, everyone, before you either book your own travel or before you go to a travel advisor and have a consultation to see if they can help you, you need to really think about these things first to see if that might be what you want to do. You might want to do a solo trip that is like exploring your inner worlds, through outer places. And that's just a really amazing thing. And I was there in the off season. It was November, a few more days in the little island places were closing down in November, but it was good for me. There were still people around, so it wasn't deserted, but it wasn't so crowded that couldn't enjoy it. And that's part of what makes it sustainable. And if people are really concerned about, being net zero and all that, or carbon, not even just carbon neutral, carbon positive, you could always buy carbon offsets. And carbon offsets are actual projects around the world. So it might not be helping that one particular city where you're going, but it could be planting, say, mangrove trees in the Philippines, where there's always like typhoons and tidal waves and lots of damage, and people are killed. So you might be saving people and plants and property, and on the other side of the world. It doesn't mean it's not legitimate, and it doesn't mean it's not helping. So I think another part of what we need to do now is to start thinking differently about travel and sustainability, and thinking more globally instead of just like what is helping or hurting the particular place where I'm going. Although that is important as well. See, it's so complex, but this is just a beginning conversation. Let me know if you have any questions. You can put them in the comments.